back. Now, Parliament recently heard that 8 months into the launch of the 500 million rand Spaza Shop Support Fund, only 57 million rand has reached legitimate South African Spaza Shop owners. Now, while the Department of Small Business Development cites strict due diligence to block fraudulent application and foreign national fronting, local business leaders argue that red tape is stifling township entrepreneurs. Joining us in studio is Becky Twala, President of the Township Economic Commission of South Africa, to break down the reality on the ground. But Becky, thank you very much for your time this morning. Let's start by just giving a brief background of why we find ourselves here, where government is needing to set aside this 500 million rand in order to fund legitimate South African Spaza Shop owners who are seeking funding.
Thank you, Nombu. Good morning to you. Happy Sunday. And good morning to the viewers at home. Yes, I think it's very important, Nombu, to go back and start understanding how this whole concept came about. Remember, in 2023, there's 2 kids who died in Naledi. And then we've been engaging with the government to say, look, it's very important to regulate this whole issue of some of the businesses and the sectors in the township. But then when the 7 kids died to the following year in October, and then it's when government started saying, let's regulate Spaza shops, let's register them and all that, right? And then after that process, now there was the launch of the 500 million rand Spaza Shop Fund, which we need to unpack and, and also demystify so that people they understand how this whole thing came about.
Sure.
And the reason why I'm also in the front of the thing, because when it was launched, government came to me asking me to assist them in terms of finding the venue and inviting people to launch this Spaza Shop Fund. It was launched, I think, on the 7th of April, 8th of April, 2025, at Mufulo. Now, what happened is that people need to understand that the 500 million, the 350 million come from the DTIC, and then the 150 come from Department of Small Business Development. Now, these 2 departments have got agencies. The DTIC got NEF, and then also the Department of Small Business, they've got SEDFA to distribute. Meaning, in other words, it's not the department or the ministers that are distributing the money,
right,
but it's the agencies that are distributing the money. Now, yes, people would need to then understand that, when you need to apply for the funding, there's 3 things that you need to go through. One, you need to have what we call the compliance issue, which is now the business compliance. When we talk about business compliance, we're talking about registering a company, CIPC, opening up a bank account. That's the first phase. Then the second phase, you need then to register for the industry compliance, where you're talking about now the trade license, the trade permit, the COA, the certificate of acceptability, and you name it. Once you tick that box, then the last part is now the application now for funding. Because at the end of the day, you can't apply for funding if you didn't, go through these 2 phases.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, you won't be ticking the boxes.
And so that leads me to my next question, Babeki, is that where in that chain of tick boxes are people getting it wrong? Why is it seemingly so difficult for those who are seeking funding to get their hands on it?
No, remember, as a Township Economic Commissioner said, we had to then position ourselves as the oversight organization that is looking at the monitoring of this whole process. One of the things that we've realized is that people are not complying. And one of the things is that, yes, compliance is very expensive. But at the end of the day, you have people on one side that are saying they're looking for funding, and you've got government that has the funding available. But now, where is the missing link? The missing link is the compliance. Because remember, to get you to the trade license or the permit or the COA, there are documents that you need. Some of the people, they can't even access those documents. Documents like your title deed, the land use, license and all those things. Now it becomes tedious for people to be able to do that. That is why, as TEXA, we then said to ourselves, let's go out there and assist people how to then comply. Because at the end of the day, if you don't comply, you won't be able to get the funding.
Right. I mean, we know that 38% of applicants get rejected purely due to licensing delays. How better can, I mean, outside of the help that you're giving these individuals, municipal officers obviously have a role to play, and I would imagine that there is backlog there. Have you had any concerns from applicants who are saying that it is the municipal officers, in fact, that are holding up processing their trading permits?
Remember, when we talk about that, you look at the stakeholders. The first stakeholder here is COGTA, because they do the regulation and the registration of sponsorship through the province and through the municipalities. Then you've got the Department of Small Business Development for funding and the DTIC. Now, the problem now, we need to solve it from the municipal point of view. Because remember, the documents that people are looking for in terms of them to be approved, some of them, they don't have those documents. That is why we're engaging with the City of Johannesburg or the municipalities and engaging with SALGA and all the stakeholders to say, how do we make sure that at the end of the day, people, they get those documents? Because if you don't tick those boxes, you can't get to the next level.
Government has also been concerned about fronting, all right? So this is foreign nationals then putting forward South Africans in exchange for a fee to then do this application. But ultimately, those Paza shops are owned by these foreign nationals. Have you had any incidents of fronting that you've come across?
Yeah, I think let's correct that. There is no fronting when you come to now the application for funding. At the end of the day, you can't. Now, that concern was when people are applying now for the permits, the trade licenses and all that. We've heard about that. We haven't seen it, but we then asked our own South African to say, look, it is a crime to do that. That is why we've asked them to refrain from doing that.
So just explain to us, Babeki, how that would work. So you're saying that there is no fronting when it comes to getting the funding itself, but when it comes to permits.
Yeah, but remember, that funding is strictly for South Africans. You can't get that funding if you're not a South African. Let's start from there. We need to clear that up, right? But now what happened is that when there was that vacuum of registering for sponsorships and all that, because remember, there were deadlines. Now, obviously, some of the people, as I heard, that some of the people, they then went and registered, and then after they've registered, then they've hired out their certificate to the foreign nationals. Basically, because there is no way where a foreign national can go and apply for the funding. That is why at the end of the day, we're saying those that have that information, I think they need to come forward, or they can even go and open up cases if they've got the proof that that funding it's also being given to the foreign nationals. But according to us, as the people that we're working very hard on the ground, we haven't seen that. That is why we're making sure that even those that are funded now, we are going back to them just to check the process and just see whether they've received the money that they were supposed to be receiving. Another thing, Nompu, that I wanted to also to explain, a sponsorship is eligible to get 100,000, but it's divided. 40,000 is for stock, 50,000 is for infrastructure, and 10,000 is for your marketing, your training, and all that. But not everybody qualify for the 100,000. But some of the sponsorship, they will only qualify for stock because they've got the infrastructure. Sure. Some of them, they will qualify for the whole 100,000. That is why we then need to check and make sure that we go there. Another thing is that before the government or the NEF or the SEFA give you money, they go personally to go and check. They go and do it physical.
And Babeki, I was going to ask about the government's training. I understand it's on digital stock system as well as bookkeeping. Is it actually useful? I mean, have you found that officers from both the DTIC as well as small business development are actually going to these individuals that have received their funding to give them this training? And is it useful?
Yeah. Actually, they do. That is why we are now partnering. We're making sure that when you go out there to the people, we are there. Because at the end of the day, remember, we are not politically aligned. We are not a government entity. We are an independent entity. we need to make sure that whatever that they're saying, it's exactly what the people are receiving. That is why every Tuesday we've got these master classes, we go to the people, we go to the community hall, we call them in, so that we're assisting them in terms of the process and making sure that we then make sure that we do oversight, because we need to make sure that we do oversight and then make sure that whatever that the government is saying or the agencies are saying is true.
And so, I mean, another thing that government has said is that 930 individuals received funding. I mean, do you know even one person who's...
Yeah, I've got that list even personally.
Okay.
I've got that
of
list.
All 930?
31. It's 931. Yeah, so I've got that list. That is why, as taxer, we then make it to the point that we'll be going and visiting those companies. That is why we're also having what we call the Gauteng Spaza Shop Summit and Expo, where we'll be calling them, those that receive the money, we'll have the round table discussion with all the businesses that got the money so that they can also do testimony. Because one of the things that are very important is the messaging. Those that got the money, they need to come and we need to invite them here.
Sure.
To come and talk about their experiences, so that at the end of the day, people, they will then understand that, yes, there are people that are funded and there are people that are happy that their sponsor shops, are running. I've seen some of them as well personally.
Yeah. And so from what I've heard you saying, just as we wrap up, Becky, is that, we've always been under the impression that it's really government bureaucracy that is a hindrance to applicants actually getting the funding. But from our conversation, I'm getting the sense that you're saying it really is non-compliance by the applicants that is the biggest impediment.
100%. That is why we then said, let's also jump in. Because it's not about the government, it's government alone. It's not a problem for government. It's also us as organized business formations also to jump in and make sure that at the end of the day, we assist. The challenge here, Nombu, it's simple. It's just compliance.
Yeah. And so we're certainly going to be leaning or relying on you to get us the contacts of those. I think a roundtable discussion on experiences by successful applicants would really be a great conversation to have. So our producers will be in touch with you to get those contacts.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. We'll invite you guys to come and see that roundtable.
Wonderful. All right. That is Becky Twala, President of the Township Economic Commission of South Africa.